Hey, welcome back to the Expert Edge. Today we're talking all things expanding your influence. Your influence is the cornerstone to growing your coaching, your course business. And I'm going to reveal to you a formula that I've never shared before on what I believe is the thing that helps to grow your influence. There's 3 factors that helps to grow your influence. I'm going to share with you that formula today. A little bit on a personal note, I just got back from Yosemite National Park. It's beautiful. Absolutely stunning. There's this famous mountain there, El Capitan, which is the most famous kind of rock climbing. It's incredible. So good to see all of that. We're about to do the Oregon coast, about to check out Seattle and the Oregon coast and the redwoods, all that sort of stuff. So wish me luck. I'm going with the kids and the family, and it's going to be good. But that's what's happened for us personal, doing a lot of traveling and stuff at the moment. And let's get into today's conversation, all about expanding your influence. Hey, it's Colin, and you are listening to the Expert Edge podcast. I was a professional speaker for over a decade, and now I focus on helping coaches, speakers, and course creators to speak and sell on virtual and live stages. The Expert Edge podcast is weekly content focused on helping you build your expert business. We cover marketing, storytelling, sales, communication skills, and so much more. Thanks for taking the time to tune in, and make sure you subscribe and follow us on all our social channels so you don't miss a thing. Let's listen to today's episode. So let's talk about expanding your influence. For me, influence is such a fascinating topic. I think it is something that we all must continue to work on, because the more influence you have, the more income you're going to make. And obviously, the more impact you're going to have in your life and in the marketplace. But what is influence? Influence is the ability to be known and to have an impact on people, even if you aren't physically with them. I want you to think about with your expert business that you're going to have influence in the marketplace from the sense of you're going to build a brand, like you're going to build a reputation. And that's part of what I'm going to have a conversation about today. But essentially, you're going to be building this reputation that you get known for, that people speak about you. I know even for me, the other day I got a text from a friend, and that friend was looking at joining someone's program. And they were like, hey, what do you think of this person? They're basically asking me, what is this person's reputation? What is this person's influence? And they had a great reputation, and they ended up joining the program. It's really interesting. And I also think that in the expert industry, people don't realize how small the expert industry is. And I have the chance to have conversations with people at the highest level in this expert industry. I'm in a few different masterminds and coaching programs and things like that. And I want you to know that people notice things. Like, as soon as you start to really make a mark on the industry, people notice it. They talk about you, and what you want them to talk about is obviously good things, right? Is obviously a stellar reputation, is a reputation that you can get behind, that really generates and attracts your great audience. So I'm going to share with you 3 ideas that have helped me to build my influence, to expand my influence over the years in building my expert business. The first big idea, and I've started to touch on this a little bit, is this idea of build an elevated reputation. So when you're first starting out, you start promoting yourself, you start putting yourself on social media, you start maybe attending a few events, you start kind of getting involved in different programs. Your elevated reputation is not really there yet. But I want you to realize that as you do this consistently, you're going to build a reputation. And you already have a reputation, by the way. You have a reputation with your clients. You have a reputation in the marketplace. But I want you to think about this. This is the equation for me. Your reputation is the skills you've developed times your character, like how you show up, times your visibility. That is your reputation. So in other words, your skills and character. So are you really good at what you do? And in fact, I think that is actually a really important part of expanding your influence, is getting really good at what you do. Now, how do you do that? Well, you keep growing. In fact, I think it was John Maxwell. I was recently listening to him, and he said, the only way to really secure your success is to continue growing. And he actually said something interesting. He said, most people think that his obsession is on leadership. And he said, sure, he's known as the number one leadership person in the world, but he's like, that's not my obsession. He said, my obsession is learning. He said, the thing that I love the most out of anything is not leadership. It's actually learning. And he really lives that. Like, I got to spend 2 days with him recently, and he's a very curious learner. He's always writing things down. He's always noting things. Like, he's in sessions of people who are, nowhere near established as well as him, but he's like writing tons of notes. He's taking things down, and he's 77 years old. And that really stood out for me, of like his hunger for learning. Like, it's exceptional. It's visceral. It's just insatiable. And so this stood out for me of like getting really good at your skills. I love this. He said this one thing. He goes, the first time you do something, you're not very good at it. But at some point, it's good to get good at what you do. I'm like, yeah, that's kind of true. But he goes, but the first time you do it, you're never good at it. But he goes, at some point, it's good to get good. And so I want you to think about this idea of like really getting really good at your skills. And when you get good at your skills and you show up as a trustworthy individual, like a consistent, trustworthy individual, your character, and who knows that, in the expert industry, we've seen some people rise up really high in the expert industry and then have a massive fall from grace. All right, I'm not going to name any names, but that's happened many times. And all of us are vulnerable to that. I'm vulnerable to that. Like, I know I'm kind of like, I laugh about it because it's a little bit uncomfortable, right? It's a little bit kind of, oh my gosh, like that's intense. And these people, they had visibility. If you think about this, guys, they had visibility, they had skills, but they didn't have character. And because they didn't have character, they didn't build a stellar reputation. They built a reputation, but it ended up having a large tarnish on it. Now, can you come back from that? 100%. I mean, for most of us, most of the time, people can come back. They can keep showing up and come back from it and rebuild their reputation. But I want you to realize that your reputation is so important. And your reputation is basically the cornerstone of expanding your influence. Your reputation is the thing that goes before you even enter the room. And as you start to build your programs, you're going to get a reputation for your programs. It's funny with Self from Stage Academy. When I first set out to build Self from Stage Academy, I was like, I want to build the most robust, comprehensive and easy to use Self from Stage program where people can build high converting presentations. I want to build the best one in the world, where if they could only get one program their entire life, if they got this, they would learn what they needed to learn. Like, that was my intention with Self from Stage Academy. And that over the years has built a reputation. I feel like it's built a great reputation, but it's because of the quality. It's the skills and the character that goes into it, right? And then obviously there's a visibility to it. There's a visibility, you get known for it. And visibility is obviously, how many eyeballs are on you. But one of the biggest things with expanding your influence is understanding this. And this is like a continual equation that you're doing. You want to increase your visibility. That can be on social media or on podcast guesting. That for me, by the way, is one of my favorite ways to increase my visibility. It's one of the easiest ways is to leverage someone else's audience. In fact, just this week, I was on quite a big podcast called the Better Life Podcast with Brandon Turner. If you want to go and check that out, I was the session this week of the recording, so it was probably a couple of weeks ago. But the Better Life podcast with Brandon Turner, pretty big podcast, and I was just on that there. That expands my influence because it increases my visibility. Does that make sense? But it was my skills times my character that got me on to that platform of visibility. And so the first big idea I want you to think about is that you need to hone your skills and keep your character while you increase your visibility. It's interesting. Someone mentioned this scripture to me. It was actually a scripture. We were having a conversation. It's Proverbs 22:29. He said, "Do you see a man who excels in his work? He will stand before kings. He will not stand before unknown men." And we were just talking about this idea of influence. And even just there in the scriptures, I love that. It says, a man who excels, or a woman who excels at her skills, she will stand before kings. She will not stand before unknown men. I love that. And so this idea of developing your skills, what I'm trying to say is like, this is a timeless principle. And any investment you make in developing your own skills will build a elevated reputation. Now, you still need visibility, but if you don't have the skill set, when you get the visibility, it's not going to create the visibility that you want. First idea is that you need to build an elevated reputation, and your reputation is the cornerstone of building expanded influence in your life. The second big idea that I found, this really tactical idea, is attending influential events. For me, over the years, I could definitely count, a number of people where I met them at an event. We've stayed connected over the years. We've done work together. We've developed together. I would say either events or just being a part of different programs. But for me, the idea of attending influential events and meeting people at these events, building my network, especially in-person events, have made such a big difference. I think that if the program is a virtual program and it's done over a period of time, you can build amazing relationships. But obviously attending a one-off virtual event, that's kind of hard to build some relationships. But if you're in a coaching program where you're seeing people every week, every other week, I'm in some virtual coaching programs where I don't see people in person and we still build incredible relationships. But I think in-person influential events are well worth the investment. And I know for me, I attend certain events throughout the years, whether it be the big ClickFunnels events, Kajabi events, National Speaker Association events, which is called Influence, just different events. Brennan Bouchard runs events, like different bigger events that you can attend and just meet and network people can make a big difference. Because when you meet people who know more stuff, who think differently, who are thinking on a bigger level, it can make a huge difference in your life. So that's the second big idea, is attend influential events, and that will help to expand your influence. The third big idea, and this is a little bit more conceptual, but I think it can make a huge difference, is find your differentiators. Because as you start to build your reputation, you start to build your influence, people are going to ask the question of, you, like, what makes you different? And it's even more than just being different. It's what makes you unique. What makes you someone that, I would want to go to you as opposed to them. And I get that question as well. When I'm making an offer to my audience, sometimes they'll say, what's the difference between your program and this person's program? And I will say that most of the time I've never heard of the person. So maybe that is a difference. But what I'm saying is, not really. But what I'm saying is that people are going to ask that question of your programs and what you kind of represent. And so the more you can find a differentiator, the better. Here are 4 things that you can find a differentiator in. Number 1 is your strengths. So knowing what your strengths are is really important. In fact, I was just having a conversation with a client on a coaching call, and we were talking about their Clifton strengths. So if you haven't done the Clifton's Strength Finder, go and do that. My Strength Finder is number 1 is woo. That's my top strength, is woo, which is essentially winning people over. Now, because that is my top strength, the way that I sell from stage, and the reason why people like learning from me, is because I do it in a way that wins people over. It doesn't push people over or aggressively, pushes things onto people. It irresistibly attracts them into the programs. And so essentially what I've done is taken my strength and made it a differentiator, if that makes sense. And so a great thing to do is to do your Clifton Strength, find out what your strengths are and your one or two strengths, and think about how you can integrate them into your programs. I know for a lot of time people, I've seen people run speaking programs or selling programs where they say, sell without selling. And then I see what they're doing and I'm like, that is not selling without selling. That's just weird. That's just icky. And when people see like my infusion selling techniques that you infuse throughout the training in amidst the value in the teaching, like a lot of time people go, oh my gosh, like this just feels so natural when they see the storytelling strategies that I teach around like how to tell a story in a way that naturally attracts your audience towards wanting to work with you without saying, buy my stuff. They're like, oh my gosh, like this it's so stealth. It's so natural. It's so powerful. And that's because I've integrated my number one strength into what I do. Does that make sense? And so yours is going to be different, which is good. Like it's going to be a different differentiator in terms of what you do. And so that is a great way to find out what you do different, right? Maybe your number one strength is strategic. And that was actually one of my clients' number one strengths. It was strategic. So how can you integrate that into your program as being like the most strategic orientated program in the industry in this topic? Does that make sense? So that's a really kind of cool thing to think about. What's your strengths? Because you're going to naturally bring that into your programs. Another way you can differentiate is your experiences. So think about like your upbringing, maybe your experience, maybe your previous job experience. For me, one of the differentiators for myself is that I actually used to work in not just teaching, but I was a corporate trainer in my previous life. In the corporate world, I was a full-time corporate trainer. And so I used to run training sessions all the time. So I obviously teach speaking and now selling from stages, but my background is actually in corporate training. Right. So I did, 10, 15 years in the corporate world before I even started my coaching business. And I was a full-time teacher and corporate trainer, right? That were two different jobs, but that was my background. And that actually adds some depth to my experience of why I'm really good at what I do now, right? It's not just, I haven't just done one course and now I teach it. There's actually a depth of experience, but you've got a depth of experience as well, don't you? Like in what you do. And how can you bring part of that depth of your experience into your messaging, how you can make what you do a differentiator, something different? The third idea, results. Like, have you got some results that are outstanding or some accolades, some status? Maybe you've been featured somewhere. For me, I think about different results. It could be like working with really influential people. And I've shared this publicly, but I've had the chance to work with people like Amy Porterfield, Jenna Kutcher, Kerry Green, like different major influencers who are true leaders in the marketplace. And I've had the chance to actually work with them on their presentations when they're selling. And so that's a real differentiator in the marketplace. Now, I didn't start out there, obviously, but if you think about it, we go back to the equation. I built my skills, I kept my character, and then I increased my visibility by attending events, by joining programs, by building my social media. And then eventually my reputation got to a point where people at the highest level trusted me. Does that make sense? And so that's the equation. And it doesn't happen overnight. I'm personally interested in the long term, like building this long term. I've been running this expert business full time for 15 years now. And for me, I'm thinking like, what's the next 10 years look like? And so I'm thinking about that long-term reputation. So something unique, maybe you've been featured in some big publications. I actually spent a bit of time, this was 2 or 3 years ago, really focusing on being featured. And I was like, I want these 5 big logos to be able to, with integrity, obviously, put it on my website and go, I've been featured in these 5 big platforms, right? And so that can be a great way. Or it could be just results in terms of maybe you've just got amazing results with your clients and you've got some incredible testimonials. That can be a huge differentiator. Maybe they opt into a webinar, they hit your thank you page, and underneath it is like a list of all the results that you've got, video testimonials, stories that people are sharing about the work that they've done with you. Social proof is such a massive differentiator. Robert Cialdini, who wrote the book Influence, he wrote a second book, which is called Persuasion. And his revelation was that social proof was what he felt like one of the number one factors in persuading people to make a decision before they even get to the decision point. So if you can do a lot of social proof on the front end, people are primed to trust you and make a decision when they get to that buying, that purchase decision. Does that make sense? That's a huge one. And the fourth big idea around finding your differentiator is your story. Now, your story it's you, it's unique to you. And when I say story, it's not just like your whole story, it's your conversion story. So we've had 7,500 people go through conversion story formula. So if you haven't gone through that, definitely go and check that out. It's $47. It's a no-brainer. Conversionstoryformula.com. And that will help you discover your story. But when you tell your story, that thing differentiates you because no one else has your story, right? And you got to tell the right story. You got to tell that story of transformational conversion that you went through into the experience that you help people with. So let's recap on these three big ideas. Build an elevated reputation. Your reputation is your skills times your character. So you've got to build your skills, keep your character, and expand your visibility. That creates an elevated reputation. Okay. The second big idea, attend more influential events and programs. Networking with people, especially in person, if you can attend some in-person events, can make a huge difference in growing your connections, your relationships in the industry. And number three, find your differentiator. We talked about 4 ways you can find your differentiator: with your strengths, do Clifton's Strength Finder, your experience, maybe just like your background, results that you've got, like standout results or features, and your story, your conversion story. That is crucial in terms of finding. Those are all 4 factors that can help to decide your differentiator in terms of what you do. So, hey, if this has been helpful, why don't you leave a review? If you haven't left a review yet, please leave a review. That would be really great. Take a snapshot and maybe share it with a friend or share it on social media and tag me just at Colin Boyd if you've been listening. I'd love to connect with you on Instagram. Tag me at Colin Boyd, take a screenshot, and maybe just send it to a friend. Could you hit the share button? Send this to a friend if you think you know a friend who this would encourage them, this would help them to think on the next level in terms of their coaching business. That's one of the best ways for me that the podcast grows. When I get someone shares a text message over text, shares it with me, a podcast, and says, hey, you should have a listen to this, I always have a listen. So please do that. I'd really, really appreciate that. Thanks for being a part of the Expert Edge, and we will see you next week. Bye for now.